For most people, a clear blue sky is a comforting sight. Indeed, of all the familiar sights in our life, the sky provides the reassurance that all is right with the world. But as with all things with which we grow comfortable, we sometimes take the sky for granted. Here is your sky, clear, blue, and limitless. Here is another view of your sky, this time dotted with clouds. And here also is your sky, and those now common trails. Is there any difference between this kind of airplane trail and these trails? Obviously, these easily observable trails are not natural cloud formations. They can be seen on any given day to come from airplanes. They are man-made and dissipate rapidly in the sky. These too are man-made and come from planes. But these trails linger, collect, and eventually cover the entire sky. Is there any difference between these clouds and these clouds? Between these trails and these trails? Why haven't we noticed them before? And why isn't anybody talking about them? In the early part of 1999, an immense operation began. An operation that many of us would find difficult to accept were it not so well documented. This operation has involved a dispersal of massive amounts of fine materials into our atmosphere. And the implications of these actions are as grave and far-reaching as they strain the limits of understanding. Should you ask the authorities, there will be counterclaims to the evidence presented here, and you may be told that all is normal, and as it should be. You may be told that there is nothing to be concerned about, and that everything is as it always has been. Your eyewitness accounts may be dismissed as unreliable, despite the fact that what you have observed is in direct contradiction to fundamental natural laws and your own common sense. From this point on, we urge you to look for yourself, use your own judgment, and reach your own conclusions. What you are seeing now is quite normal. These temporary trails are called contrails, which is a word formed from the words condensation and trails. They are made of water vapor, and they are a common and natural occurrence, which happens as a result of aircraft flying at high altitudes, in particular ordinary weather conditions. You can see that the condensation disappears fairly quickly, much like your breath on a cold winter day. The aircraft at the upper portion of the screen leaves a normal contrail, which vanishes as any trail of water vapor will. To contrast, beneath it is an aircraft emission that is thick, continuous, and persistent. The environmental conditions accompanying each trail are not exceptionally different from one another, and yet the result and impact from each is entirely different. The only logical way this could occur is if the two trails themselves had very different qualities, and indeed they do. The majority of the footage that you are now seeing has been filmed in the high desert regions of New Mexico. This is an arid, dry environment with very low humidity levels. Contrails are very common here because they form easily in a low humidity, dry environment. Cold and dry conditions, exactly those conditions normally found in the upper atmosphere, are extremely favorable to contrail formation. The humidity levels of the upper atmosphere are relatively low. For a normal cloud to materialize, two fundamental elements must exist: particles such as microscopic dust and moisture. Unlike contrails, clouds cannot form well in especially clean air. They require particles that act as a base for water vapor to cling to. The size of these particles must be extremely small, less than 1/100th of the width of a human hair. The other essential component for normal cloud formation is a humidity level of about 70% or more. Notice that the requirements for cloud formation and contrail formation are entirely different from one another. Clouds need moisture and fine particles for the moisture to cling to, and contrails need the opposite, clean, dry air. This is because they are based upon entirely different natural laws. An aerosol is a substance made up of solid particles suspended either in a liquid or a gas, and in this case we can consider our own atmosphere to be a gas. Because in addition to the normal existence of clouds and contrails, aerosol sprays are being emitted from aircraft flying at high altitudes. Aerosols in the air can be seen in two primary forms: as an emission from aircraft and as a collection of suspended particles in the atmosphere. A suitable term for this collection of aerosols is an aerosol bank. It is known now that these persistent trails, known commonly as chemtrails, from the words chemical and trails, are not predominantly water vapor, like contrails, but are primarily solid in nature, because of the sheer volume of particulate matter they contain. By simply looking up and observing the skies, one can now regularly see with the naked eye aircraft repeatedly dispersing materials into the upper atmosphere at altitudes of roughly 35 to 45,000 feet. These materials expand rather than evaporate, and they usually transform gradually into a uniform haze that has, in recent years, tremendously decreased our general visibility and has altered the deep blue of our skies into a pale blue or dirty white. Although it might be witnessed in any given period, this commonly now occurs during times of very low humidity, on the order of 30 to 40%, instead of the 70% or greater that is required of natural cloud formation. And so we know now that these are not clouds in any conventional sense. They are a unique and artificial creation. These aerosol emissions are now well entrenched into our air supply. These changes in the very air we breathe have a fundamental impact upon all life on this planet, and these aerosol operations, by their very nature, violate the most basic human rights. These operations are being conducted without your knowledge or your informed consent. They affect your life, the lives of everyone you know and love, and the future of life on the planet. We all consider a clean blue sky and healthy air as our birthright, a source for joy, and it remains at the very core of our existence. What we are discussing here is more than just some dry scientific facts. We are talking about the experiences, health, and quality of life itself. Who is doing this? In 1999, a website, Carnicom.com, was created by scientist and researcher Clifford Carnicom to call attention to the aerosol operations being observed over the southwestern desert skies of the US. The developer of that site, Clifford Carnicom, is a former federal employee with no political or environmental notoriety. Within a matter of days of the launch of his website, it became apparent that it was being closely monitored by high-level government organizations and military agencies, including the Pentagon, National Security, Intelligence and Emergency Agencies, the U.S. Senate, defense contractors, chemical and pharmaceutical companies, weapons and defense contractors, health organizations, and the media. The interest demonstrated by these various organizations in the website was documented for a period of several months. Despite their obvious keen interest, these same organizations have carried on a campaign of continuous dismissal of the urgency of the issue and a refusal to publicly investigate it. A wide variety of examples can be found of government and military officials who have denied the existence or importance of aerosol operations. Many of these denials contain within them identical words and phrases. August 2000, Lieutenant Colonel Michael K. Gibson, U.S. Air Force, said, "The chemtrail hoax has been investigated and refuted by many established and accredited universities, scientific organizations, and major media publications." Colonel Gibson gave no specifics. In 2001, Colonel Walter M. Washabau, U.S. Air Force, said, "The chemtrail hoax has been investigated and refuted by many established and accredited universities, scientific organizations, and major media publications." Colonel Washabau also gave no specifics. Charles H. Taylor, representative from North Carolina, Senator Jeff Bingaman of New Mexico, Representative Mike Thompson of California, and U.S. Senator Richard Lugar all responded to concerned constituents that they had been assured by the military and other government sources that nothing was amiss. In one of these responses, it was stated that, although there may be the appearance of an aerosol operation, this is not the case. Furthermore, Senator Lugar stated that the Federal Aviation Agency, the Environmental Protection Agency, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Agency, and academic professors have examined the aerosol operation claims only to find that they have been made by disreputable sources who do not provide evidence or data. This, despite the fact that volumes of data and material samples have been provided to the EPA and are available on the Carnicom website, as well as others. There have been many reports and inquiries regarding aerosol operations from concerned citizens to Carol N. Browner, then administrator at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Her response was to repeatedly assert that the EPA was unaware of any activities to release chemical or biological substances into the atmosphere by aircraft. In January of 2000, a certified letter, including a physical sample of highly unusual airborne fibrous material, was sent to Ms. Browner with a request that the EPA identify the material on behalf of the public welfare. Despite several follow-up inquiries, the EPA gave no acknowledgement of receipt of that material. When independent researchers during that time then discovered unusual biological components within that same sampling of material, concerns grew regarding the importance of a full and official response to the samples by the EPA. 1.5 years after the original submission, in June of 2001, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency finally acknowledged the receipt of the unusual fibers of physical material. This acknowledgement only occurred after a formal Freedom of Information Act inquiry. However, though receipt of the sample was acknowledged, the EPA refused to identify the sample, stating that it was not the policy of this office of the EPA to test or otherwise analyze any unsolicited samples of material or matter. In October of 2000, a series of more than 1,000 petition letters of concern were sent to Carol Browner as an indication of the significant citizen concern on the aerosol issue. In December of 2000, the EPA responded once again that they continued to remain unaware of any aerial application of chemical or biological substances that may have any adverse effect upon the population. In November of 1999, the Attorney General of New Mexico, Patricia Madrid, acknowledged multiple inquiries to her office regarding unusual aircraft operations. She declared that there is substantial evidence that the activity and contrails are well within the range of normal aerial activity. After issuing this notice, Attorney General Madrid declined to respond to 2 visits made to her office by Clifford Carnicom to discuss the aerosol issue. Also in November of 1999, the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency responded to a citizen by stating that they were unable to complete an investigation. Efforts have been made to involve the media in exposing the aerosol operations, including ABC News 2020 investigative journalism staff, who responded that the request for examination of the aerosol issue was not a topic that they would cover. Since the beginning of 1999, a series of more than 36 scientific methods have been used, most notably by Clifford Carnicom, to examine the dramatic alteration of the atmosphere that has taken place. These tests have been conducted with much labor, time and expense. They've been conducted with very limited resources and equipment, much of it requiring original construction, development or modification. What follows is only a partial overview of these sampling methods, which have been diverse and thorough, spanning more than 9 years. As far as is publicly known, the authorities have not attempted to replicate these tests, nor have they reacted to the results in any formal fashion. Therefore, the method has been primarily one of reverse engineering, to figure out what is being sprayed on us and why. These methods include meteorological studies, an examination of visibility standards and their reduction from a maximum of 40 to 10 miles, studies of acid and alkalinity levels of rainfall across the country, photographs and video showing emissions from aircraft which are in complete defiance of the conditions for any normal contrail formation, direct observation with the naked eye of aerosols originating from the aircraft gathered by thousands of individuals around the world, high-efficiency particulate air filters which have been used to directly filter the outdoor air in repeated tests. Extraordinary levels of particulate materials have been found, including the repeated presence of unusual filaments, a gel formation, crystals and powders. Electromagnetic devices which have been developed and used specifically for this research. Distilled rainwater samples to concentrate any solid materials or particulates. Observation of irregularities in normal radar activity. The tests reveal that as a result of the aerosol operations, samples of the atmosphere have been found to contain unusually high levels of the following: metallic-based materials, a class of elements that have the property that they can become electrically charged with the energy from sunlight alone. One of the elements found in unusual and unexpected levels is barium. Unusual airborne filaments. Under a microscope, these fibers are seen to contain unusual biological components. Incredibly high mold counts are regularly found, surprisingly, even in the extremely dry environment of the high southwest. Additionally, testing has produced a variety of indications that the atmosphere is regularly being used for electromagnetic applications, which can have a very direct influence on the health of humans.
I have a degree in science. I have a doctorate in science, so I consider myself to be maybe not an expert in this particular thing, but I know how to look at things. And I learned a little bit about meteorology and the atmospheric conditions necessary for even a contrail to form and persist, much less ones that just dissipate, and found that there were no laws of physics that supported this activity or the explanation of this activity as a normal water vapor or frozen vapor trail. And so I came up with things like, well, all of a sudden, the jet goes overhead, and in the same sky you'll see 2 or 3 jets passing overhead, and there's nothing. You can barely see the jets because they're so high up. And other jets come into an area, and all of a sudden the white trail starts all of a sudden coming out of the jet, and then it stops, and then it starts again. And I've seen a number of occasions where they just did dashes across the sky. And
stops and
starts.
I
talked to a few pilots, and I asked them, well, how can you do this? And they said, well, you can turn your engine off. I said, would you do it over and over again? He says, if you're nuts. And I started noticing, especially by March of '99, April of '99, people were becoming very, very ill. And at the time I was working in a healthcare facility, and I was seeing a lot of upper respiratory disease happen. And over the years, I've watched more and more people come down with asthma, and you can hear it. You go to the supermarket and you find children, children that are 2 and 3 years old, and you can hear them wheezing. You can hear rails in their chest. I mean, this is very unusual.
The following is a reenactment of a transcribed interview between Clifford Carnicom and Gwen Scott, naturopathic doctor and former CNN broadcaster, originally recorded in February of 2004.
You have a background in the world of journalism and specifically broadcast journalism. Can you talk a little bit about that background and also the relationship of the media to what is occurring?
Yes, well, you know that I was in broadcasting for 30 years. I worked for all 3 affiliated networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, and many of the larger markets, and I culminated my career as an anchor at CNN and Headline News. So I have, over the years, a lot of really good contacts in some pretty high places in the media. But I would imagine pretty much everybody watching this will know that there have been dramatic changes in the media. Who owns the media? The quality of human being attracted into the media. In other words, why are they there? When I started, it was mostly all print folk, and they kind of had to tell us, come on, clean up your act, this is visual. But people were coming from the old school of journalistic, afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. And you're the watchdog, and you go for that story, and you never accept the official version, and on and on and on. Most of the media and information we get now is owned by only 3 companies. When they deregulated, when the FCC deregulated, they allowed these huge, like AOL Time Warner, to gobble up. So you've got these large entities controlling all the information, whether it's film, radio. And yes, when this started, I called in every chip I ever had. I called a very good buddy at CNN who really assigned most of the stories. He was very high on the story, very interested. I sent him your website, a lot of your information. He was hi, yay, yay, shut down. And I never did get an explanation. As you well know, I contacted some of our local media people. The main anchor on the local station wanted to do a story, we thought, and we shot a lot of video of the activity. In those days, it was very obvious. Now it's a little harder. You don't have the mornings when you have the deep blue sky and then the afternoon. Now you get the pale blue-white sky if you're lucky, and as you well know, that story never aired. USA Today, which is an international publication, did a story on it, but it was obviously with an agenda, basically poking fun at those goofy people who saw those things. I believe there was 1 or 2 credible people interviewed, but for the most part, the reporters started out with an agenda to sort of mock or make fun of those people who were seeing things in the sky. And if I had a dime for everybody else that I called, wrote, or begged, I could at least buy an ice cream cone, to no avail, just hitting a wall.
And this was with all your connections?
This is with years of connections. It's unprecedented in my life, and I cannot name another story. People point to Watergate as this big watershed cover-up. I find that laughable. This, in my opinion, this is the biggest story. And I approach many of my colleagues this way. This is the biggest story in recorded human history. You have an entire planet now covered with whatever, by whoever, and nobody is even acknowledging it. What the heck is going on, and how come we don't know?
That is the question. What could explain that level of refusal?
Fear. Because the folks who get it, they're afraid. They know it's something bigger than them. They know all the possibilities of who's able to put planes in the sky, that many, every day, 24/7. It doesn't take a nuclear physicist to figure out that it's not the guy around the corner. This is big.
So even the journalist has that threshold that they're unwilling to cross.
Oh yeah, afraid. And the few that are left who do catch on to it say, wow, I want to do a story, like we were just discussing. They hit a wall somewhere, and I'm never told where it is. I don't know if it's the news manager, I don't know if it's the station manager, I don't know where. They hit that brick wall, and the story goes away.
Gwen Scott, naturopathic doctor.
Clifford, it's so good to be on tape in person with you on this subject. I know before we couldn't show my face, we couldn't hear my voice because I was under contractual agreement. But today, what I'd really like to talk about is the medicine end, which is my passion and my whole reason for being involved in this is to try to help people stay as well as they can stay given the givens. Never I'd live to be seeing these times. As you know, recently information was brought to us that's critical in terms of health. So I want to deal with that first, and then we can go back and talk about the other contents of this aerosol spray and the impact to the body, and perhaps some mitigating medicines. We have found out through a very credentialed research doctor that perhaps what we're seeing occasionally show up in our air supply is a fungus. The reason this is so critical is apparently this fungus dramatically compromises the immune system by consuming those nutrients the immune system uses to repair and rebuild. And like every system in our body, the immune system has to keep rebuilding itself. It will wear out, it will wear down, and it has to keep regenerating. If it doesn't have those nutritional tools to do that, your immune system becomes dramatically compromised, unable to deal with any kind of invader. That's why I think we're seeing so many more colds and flus than we've seen in the last 5.5, 6 years, than we've seen in a long time. I know in my clients, these things are like epidemic. Sinus infections, colds and flus, that's on the lighter side. On the heavier side, we're seeing a lot more cancers and some very devastating disease, implying an extremely compromised immune system. Part of that has to be this fungal kind of invasion because, as I said, this fungus eats the nutrients that the immune system uses to rebuild itself. I don't know if you know, one of the top respiratory specialists in the United States was recently on the Today Show. He's written a book called something about the breathing crisis in this country. And he told, I think it was Katie Couric, I don't recall, who was interviewing him, maybe Ann Curry, that death or mortality from respiratory disease had gone from number 8 5 years ago to almost number 3. That's huge. That means that the third leading cause of death now in this country is breathing. And one has to wonder what could have happened in 5 years to have created that kind of crisis, is the only word I can think of. So this is something that anybody who breathes, and I'm assuming that's anybody who might be seeing this documentary, needs to be concerned not only for themselves but everyone they love. This isn't like a firing squad where everybody goes down and you get to watch it at one time. This is a cumulative poisoning that will demonstrate in different people in different manners depending on how strong their immune system was to begin with, what their genetics are, and many other factors. So this is something that will demonstrate in a lot of different ways. You're not going to have, as I said, the firing squad effect, but what you will have is over time more and more debilitated people, more and more people who don't feel well, more and more younger people, which I'm seeing quite a bit of now, in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, with problems that we never saw in that age range, or rarely, I should say, saw. And I know in Albuquerque alone, 5, 6 years ago, 6 to 8% of the children were diagnosed as asthmatic. Today, as of now, it's 70%. It's devastating. These are children.
After confronting the reality of aerosol operations, it is a natural question to ask, why? Who would want to alter the very air that we breathe? The evidence is now clear that the aerosol operations are a covert activity. An operation that will never ask for your consent and that is being conducted on you and your family regardless of your concerns. The reasons why do not appear to be restricted to a single purpose. From all data gathered at this point, there could be said to be 6 main reasons why aerosol operations are being conducted. 1. Modification and control of weather and the environment. 2. Electromagnetic operations. 3. Military operations. 4. Biological operations. 5. Planetary and geophysical change. 6. Sophisticated surveillance systems. There is an overlap that can make it difficult to discern where one program may start and another end. It's likely that many or all of these operations are being conducted at the same time. Regarding modification and control of the environment, the evidence now shows that because of the aerosol operations, the very physical nature of the atmosphere has been changed. There are several components in the aerosols which are repeatedly found. One of these is a salt that seeks and holds on to moisture and can, therefore, reduce the frequency and amount of moisture that reaches the ground. Another observation that has been confirmed over and over is that the aerosol operations frequently, if not usually, are conducted in advance of approaching moisture and storms, thereby altering weather. It may be no coincidence that drought is now commonplace and widespread, and that moisture on the planet is becoming an increasingly precious and sought-after resource. It has been claimed that perhaps these aerosol operations are intended to lessen the negative effects of global warming. Unfortunately, the facts do not support these theories, and in fact, the majority of the data strongly demonstrates that these activities are having detrimental and potentially disastrous consequences to the life and ecology of this planet. Furthermore, it is easy to demonstrate that the vast majority of substances found within the aerosols will actually increase the heat levels of the lower atmosphere, rather than decrease it when they are placed into it. The United States Air Force has publicly disclosed their intention of owning the weather by 2025. And based on the information gathered and scientific tests done, it would not be unreasonable to think that that objective has, in part, already been accomplished. The full environmental impact of these aerosol operations to the soil, the seas and lakes, the flora and fauna, and the agriculture that sustains us is staggering. Electromagnetic operations designed to affect human health, control communication and guidance systems, including airplanes and missiles, radar interference, missile destruction, enhancing the ability of transporting micro-sized particles and molecular change of the atmosphere. Barium is a highly toxic heavy metal which has been found to be one of the key components contained within these aerosols. Barium, like other metals, has the property of increasing the conductivity of electricity in the atmosphere. The more of it there is, the more precisely electrical pulses can be sent through the atmosphere. The implications of being able to modify the atmosphere electrically and magnetically are enormous. A small change in the electrical properties of the atmosphere completely alters the way in which that shell around the Earth can be used. Changes in heat and energy are at the foundation of the life of this planet and all those who dwell upon it. It is a necessary, logical, and natural supposition to assume the almost inevitable role the military has in the aerosol operations. A glimpse into the military window has been achieved, and the central theme that has emerged is of control. Control in the deepest and most far-reaching sense. For when the atmosphere of the planet is controlled, life itself is controlled. If it seems unthinkable that anyone would consider such a goal, consider United States Patent 4686605 by Bernard Eastland, written in 1987, entitled A Method and Apparatus for Altering a Region in the Earth's Atmosphere, Ionosphere, and/or Magnetosphere. There are many people who have concluded that this patent essentially represents a blueprint for a facility that currently exists, which is operated by the US Air Force. HAARP, which stands for High Active Auroral Research Project, is located in Alaska, and information about it can easily be found on government websites, including pictures of the facility. The ionosphere is the upper part of our atmosphere. The stated purpose by the Air Force for the HARP project is that of a scientific endeavor aimed at studying the properties and behavior of the ionosphere, with particular emphasis on being able to understand and use it to enhance communications and surveillance systems for both civilian and defense purposes. It may be this, and then again, it may be more than simply a scientific endeavor. Per Mr. Eastland's patent, through the use of a HARP-like facility, it is possible to put unprecedented amounts of power in the Earth's atmosphere at strategic locations and to maintain that power level with a pulsing of energy. Take note that this patent also recommends the use of large clouds of barium to increase the conductivity of the atmosphere. Mr. Eastland stated a variety of uses for his invention, most of them military. It can focus in a particular area the massive energy necessary to create the same destruction as the detonation of a large nuclear device, without actually having to detonate such a device. It can enhance or interfere with communication and guidance systems, including those of airplanes and missiles, interfere with radar, destroy missiles, modify weather, and it can increase ability to broadly spread exceptionally tiny particles through the atmosphere. The executive summary for the HARP project specifically mentions forcing the descent of particles from the atmosphere toward the ground. Use of the atmosphere to spread unusual biological substances. Biological. Definition: affecting life or living organisms. In 1977, the United States Senate held hearings on the subject of biological testing by the Department of Defense on human subjects without their informed consent. In the opening statement, Senator Ted Kennedy identified the key issue of the hearings: the known use of Americans as unwitting subjects for open-air germ warfare testing conducted in the public domain by officials of their own government. Furthermore, he poses the critical question: should a democratic people cede to its government the full responsibility of determining when secret tests on unwitting subjects are necessary to protect the nation's security? Years later, this is no longer a question that is even being posed to the public. It is a fact that harmful biological components have been repeatedly identified in a series of atmospheric samples over the past several years. Public officials have never acknowledged or responded to this evidence, and the reality of the evidence continues to be denied. You must decide for yourself if the claims of this documentary are true or not. The first step is to simply look up. Start observing the sky and the activities of aircraft above you. Observe the different trails left behind aircraft: contrails or aerosols, clouds or aerosol banks. Though the amount and frequency of aerosol aircraft activity will be different in different areas, the likelihood is that in a short time you will observe aerosol operations in the skies above you. If you decide that there is cause for alarm and that something must be done about the aerosol operations, we suggest you take the following measures. First of all, start paying more attention to your own health and the health of those for whom you are responsible. Check with your own health practitioner. If your health practitioner is not familiar with the aerosol issue, ask them to watch this program. Pass this DVD on to as many other people as you possibly can. This documentary is a not-for-profit venture. It may be freely copied in its entirety and distributed. No individual is permitted to distribute this documentary with a profit motive. It has been created for the benefit of the public. Start talking to other people about it. When you notice aerosol operations in the skies above you, ask others to look. The most important step one can take right now is simply getting people to observe for themselves what is going on. Write, call, email, and visit your elected representatives and demand answers. Join with others to openly and peacefully protest what is going on. It is apparent that success will only result from an enormous and overwhelming groundswell of grassroots activism. The sober reality is that the health of this planet has already been disastrously affected, and we simply do not have much time to reverse it. Our atmosphere is our lifeblood, and most of us are moving forward with our lives, oblivious to the growing threat. Please use your talents and resources to help this planet. Clifford Carnicom chose the vital role of researcher and has endeavored to give us the most accurate and well-documented information possible about the true nature of aerosol operations. Others have chosen to help regarding the health-related aspects, and still others are working tirelessly to distribute this information broadly. You must determine your own role and exercise it while you still have the opportunity. If you are somehow involved in these aerosol operations or know of others who are, don't withhold it. Come forward and make your information known. If you've been told that what you are doing is for the benefit of mankind, please take an honest look at the tremendously negative effects created by these unnatural aerosol operations. If we remain silent in the hope of preserving our freedom and security, we are certain to lose both. Please help to restore and regain the beautiful blue, clean, healthy sky.